This is gonna take crackerjack timing, Wayne.
Total concentration. You ready, Jack?
I was born ready.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and today I'm going to review DCeased Unkillables, the sequel to Tom Taylor's breakout hit from 2019. I'll be honest here, I was a little late to the DCeased bandwagon from 2019. I actually didn't read the series when it came out. I'm not a big fan of Tom Taylor, and I'm definitely not a fan of the artist on the original book, Trevor Hairsine, so I didn't read it because I really wasn't that interested. But I did have several friends of mine, most notably Dylan from The Real Comic Book Gamer and Tevye Smolka, two wonderful YouTubers in their own right, highly recommend that book to me. So I went back, I read it this week, and I was really impressed. It was actually excellent. It was much better than anything I've really ever read by Tom Taylor, except for a Batman annual issue he did a couple years ago that was really good. But DCeased was definitely the best comic book writing I've ever seen out of Tom Taylor. So I ended up being really excited for the sequel, Unkillables. The only thing I didn't really like about DCeased was the art from Trevor Hairsine. If you ever want to make a comic book about superheroes where the superheroes don't look cool or awesome or amazing when they're saving the world, get Trevor Hairsine to illustrate it. That's exactly what he does. So I was happy there's a new artist on Unkillables, Karl Mostert, but it turns out he's actually worse. So I expected this comic to move forward with the story that was started in DCeased, but that is not what happens here. It's going backwards. It's telling the story of some new survivors from day one when the anti-life equation was corrupted and infected the world and basically started this faux zombie apocalypse that basically destroyed Earth and cost us Batman, Superman, Hal Jordan, Aquaman. They wiped out a ton of heroes in that story, but 14 million inhabitants of Earth did escape the plague. And the last time we saw them, they were in space on 2 arcs. But this is not their story. This is the story of Jason Todd, Commissioner Gordon, and Cassandra Cain in one group, and Slade Wilson and his daughter escaping in another group. I will say I'm disappointed in this book. It doesn't have any of the very well executed character moments that really were the calling card of DCeased. Yes, it was a zombie kind of apocalypse story, but it was the character moments that really sold me on that book, that really made it something I really enjoyed. I don't think DCeased was quite as good as maybe other people did, but it's really solid and definitely worth a read. Unkillables just kind of loses what made that story special, what made that comic really enjoyable. I'll be honest, I don't really recommend this comic, and I have some reasons why, and we should probably start getting into that in today's comic book review. Like I mentioned earlier, the art is from Karl Mostert. He is the penciler on this. He's got kind of a Sarah Pacelli, a Giuseppe Camuncoli style going here, but he doesn't execute it quite as well. His art is quite flat, pretty lifeless, from my perspective, and also his faces are just terrible, especially as your depth moves closer to the characters and you get close-ups of their faces. They're just awful. Everyone's ugly. The faces are just not very well realized in this comic book. Another thing that really holds it back is there are 3 inkers on this comic book, so the visuals are pretty uneven throughout. As soon as you start kind of getting used to the art style, it just changes a little bit, and it kind of distracts from the story. I just don't think it was executed very well. And color artist Rex Locus doesn't do much, if anything, to enhance the visuals here. He doesn't really add that depth or clarity or that liveliness or even a gore element to this horror comic, which it so desperately needs. DC really botched it on this one as far as the art. They totally picked the wrong art team. I thought Trevor Hairsine kind of detracted from DCeased, but it was nothing like what Karl Mostert, the inking team, and Rex Locus do on this one. The visuals are just, they're not very good. I'll rate the art 1.5 out of 5. I'm not really going to get too much into the plot. It's standard zombie apocalypse fare. Survivors trying to survive in a world gone mad. That's basically the plot. So I will talk about some characterization, some character moments, which I don't think really work anywhere near the way they did in DCeased. That was really the hallmark of that comic story for me, and it almost feels like Tom Taylor in this comic book, like he feels like a different writer, or maybe he was uninterested in doing a sequel, but they made him do it for the money. but you can tell something drastically changed in his approach to DCeased, and then with his approach to the sequel Unkillables. The first character we meet is Slade Wilson, Deathstroke. He's about to enter a compound full of Nazis when the anti-life equation virus hits Earth, and when he gets there, Nazis are fleeing the building, but they're not fleeing from him, they're fleeing from the infected. He goes in, and he basically chops down a bunch of Nazi zombies for a couple pages. As far as action goes, definitely the second best scene in the entire comic book. But after he's killed a lot of these Nazi zombies, I guess his phone rings, he picks up his cell phone, he looks at the screen, and he himself gets infected with the corrupted anti-life equation, and he starts ripping his own skin off. But there's a twist. One of the more interesting things of the entire story is, because of his healing factor, he's immune to the virus. He ends up waking up, he's choking a man, but he has healed himself, and he no longer has it. And immediately, his mind goes to his daughter, Rose, who's holed up in her apartment and refuses to leave because she sees visions of the future, and she's scared to leave because every time she opens the door, she knows she's going to die because the infected are going to barge through and kill her. Slade Wilson, being the good, dutiful father he is, calls her up. She says, "I'm not leaving. I can't open that door. I'm going to die." He says, "Don't open that door. Escape out the window. Go up to the roof, and I'm going to save you." And she's like, "How are you going to do that?" And we learn that he has a helicopter, and he's going in there for his daughter. And it's just kind of weird. When you meet her, she's scared to death. She will not go anywhere because she has visions of her own death. But as soon as she gets to the roof, she loses all fear. A cameo appearance by an infected man-bat takes down the helicopter. Slade Wilson ends up on the roof, and she just starts, stabbing him. Even though she knows that he was flying a helicopter seconds before that, and he's showing no physical signs of being infected, she just cuts him anyway. It seemed kind of weird for the character. I don't know why she did that. I certainly wouldn't stab my father if he looked healthy, even in a zombie apocalypse. As they're sitting on the roof, they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. The Mirror Master shows up. He offers to save them because Vandal Savage needs the services of one Slade Wilson Deathstroke. He takes them both into the mirror dimension, which truly should have been one of the standout moments visually of the entire comic book. It just looks so bad. This whole comic book looks bad. So they go through the mirror dimension. They end up on an island, and we see Vandal Savage and a group of villains. Bane's there. The Creepster's there. Cheetah, I think, is there. There's a bunch of villains, including Solomon Grundy. So we are going to see a story about the villains trying to survive the zombie apocalypse, whereas in DCeased, it was about the heroes surviving the apocalypse with some aid from villains. This meeting of supervillains, it just felt off. There's a weird parable about lobsters surviving some rat infestation, and then the creepers doing all kinds of weird jokes that, I don't know, they didn't seem funny. If you like that character, you're probably going to like those jokes. Fell flat for me. Didn't really like this story, to be completely honest. I don't think it was very well executed. I thought the characterization was off. A lot of things didn't make sense. But the key thing is, Slade Wilson is immune to the virus. Even if he's infected, he will heal himself. And so should the Creeper, for that matter. Now, the more interesting story, and the one that had better character moments, still not as good as the original DCeased for Tom Taylor, is Jason Todd arriving at the Batcave to meet up with Bruce Wayne and try and survive this new apocalypse that's hit the world. And he discovers Bruce Wayne, Tim Drake, and Dick Grayson all fallen in the Batcave. Pretty sad moment, Definitely harken back to the original series. Jason finds the Wayne dog Ace. They immediately bond, and he tells the dog, "Don't worry, I'm not going to leave him like this." And he does give them a true burial. And along the way, he passes a mural that's up in Wayne Manor, and it has Bruce and Alfred with all of Batman's understudies, including Jason Todd. So that was kind of nice. And when Jason Todd carves out the headstone for Bruce Wayne, it says father, mentor, bastard, Batman. I could see why he feels that way. Jason Todd does decide he's going to take a Batmobile. He uses a tracking system Bruce Wayne had set up to monitor all of his family members, so it included all the Robins. It also included Commissioner Gordon and a few other select individuals. He discovers 2 of the 8 members of the Bat family in Gotham are actually still alive, and he takes the Batmobile and Ace, and they go to save whoever it is that's still alive and kicking in Gotham. We then discover it's Commissioner Gordon, Cassandra Cain, And this is definitely the best action scene in the entire book, is when Commissioner Gordon and Cassandra Cain are fighting off zombies left and right at GCPD. The Batmobile, blasts through the wall. He's got mounted cannons laying waste to some zombies. It was a very cool thing, but then things start not making sense. He's talking to the two of them. They removes their mask in front of Commissioner Gordon because it no longer matters anymore. And Commissioner Gordon wants to know where his daughter is. Jason Todd says, she's dead. We have tracking devices on all of them. That's how I found you. He wants proof of this, so they go and they check it out. They do find Barbara Gordon dead, but they discuss it and they know that there are two surviving members of the Wayne family in the world. Both of them are in Metropolis. It's Alfred and Damien. So where does this group go? No, they don't go to Metropolis and try to reunite the family and survive this thing. They decide they're going to Bloodhaven. For no reason whatsoever. Maybe if Jason Todd explained, I have a communication device that we need, but it's hidden in Bloodhaven, we have to go there. Or I have all this equipment in Bloodhaven that we have to have. We got to go to Bloodhaven before we can go to Metropolis. That would kind of make sense. They just go to Bloodhaven anyway. For no reason whatsoever. They're not looking for Damien. They're not looking for Alfred. I don't buy that. Some of the character choices here are really odd, and they end up stuck in an orphanage, and they're gonna have their final stand saving some orphans. Like I said, there's a bit of a character moment when Jason Todd discovers Bruce Wayne and his two fallen brothers, but really that's it. There's not a lot of emotional impact in this story. I'll rate the characterization 2 out of 5. I'll rate the plot 1.5 out of 5. It's retread. It's kind of boring. There's nothing really new in this. And it's certainly not moving the DCeased story forward. Like I said, it's just going backwards. So to put a bow on this comic book review, I really enjoyed DCeased. I'm so glad I went back and read it this week. It had me very excited for Unkillables. Tom Taylor he's just a different writer over at DC Comics. His quality is much better. He must have much better oversight and direction from the editorial team, which I do think is lacking there, but it's certainly much more competent and effective than the one at Marvel, because his work at Marvel is just trash. All of it. I haven't read a single comic book from Tom Taylor at Marvel that's worth reading. If you know of the White Rhino Tom Taylor Marvel comic book that's actually worth reading, just one issue, that's all I'm asking for. Send it my way and prove me wrong, because, man, that boy is lost over there. But here on DCeased, Unkillables, it just kind of falls flat for me. The art just was so boring and uninspired. There's nothing gory about it. This is supposed to be a zombie apocalypse horror comic, featuring DC superheroes. The art was bad. It was actually a step down from Trevor Hairsine, which I didn't think was really that possible. This is probably the worst illustrated DC comic I've read in a few years. I can't even think of one that's been this bad recently. Now, I'd have to think about it for a while. This is a poorly illustrated comic book, in my opinion. As far as the story goes, inconsistent characterization. One cool revelation, Slade Wilson can be infected, but he cures himself. Rose Wilson went from being completely unfunctionable to stabbing her father in the matter of one page. Made no sense. And I don't know, the meeting up with the supervillains, in the Slade Wilson story just fell flat for me. The lobster story was stupid. I just didn't really like it. The Jason Todd story, I really wish this comic just would have been that. It's only a 3-issue miniseries. It's not like it's going to be a big, drawn-out story. They probably should have just done that story. They probably could have hit on more emotional notes and done some cooler things with it, but it gets less time in this comic book, and it's certainly far more interesting than Slade Wilson's story, in my opinion. But the emotional payoffs in this comic book are just not here like they are in the original DCeased series. It just really falls flat. It feels like Tom Taylor and DC Comics really don't understand what really connected readers to that story. It wasn't that it was a zombie apocalypse with DC superheroes. It was those character moments, those emotional payoffs, and they're just completely lacking here. I rate this comic book 2 out of 5 overall. I don't recommend this. It's not terrible. If you were just the biggest DCeased fan of all times, you might like it, but if you are a discerning comic book reader, you're not going to enjoy this, and you're going to be disappointed. The one thing it does have going for it is a 3-part miniseries, so I think a lot of people that picked up the first issue will probably just pick up the next 2 because there's only 2 left to get the full story. And, it could turn around. This is a sequel to a really good story, so maybe Tom Taylor turns around and takes it home, but I just found this terribly boring and not worth my time. Tell me what you think. Did you think Unkillables was good? Was it worth your time and money? Was I wrong? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.